If your biogas project isn't making the money you should be, then this video is probably for you. Say you have a good-sized dairy farm or a beef feedlot, something in the 50,000 head range. When you were thinking of a digester project, you probably went to a textbook, Ag Star, maybe one of the American Society for Agricultural Engineer documents, and you found some good-looking numbers there. You had a 10 pounds per day of manure per animal, so that's terrific. You're looking at 250 tons per day of manure. Biomethane potential, textbook value, say 300 cubic meters of methane per ton. That's pretty excellent too, at 85% volatile solids. Overall, that project pencils out pretty nicely, doesn't it? Depending on what your contracting is, you could be looking at somewhere $12 million or more just in gas revenue alone. Pencils out pretty well. At that point, you probably got involved with a digester consultant, an EPC firm or a technology vendor who is going to maybe actually build this for you. And they recommended you actually go out and sample your manure. So you went out to the manure pile in the yard and you took a sample, they tested it for you or you sent it to a lab. And at that point, you got some real numbers. You got methane potential number, say 250 cubic meters per ton. Pretty good value too, maybe 75% volatile solids. So okay, the manure dried out a little bit less volatile solids. Overall, what was the drop? It dropped about 17%, not too bad. The problem is though, that analysis is dead wrong. Really, you're losing more than 3 times that much in gas. 3 times. I'm David Ellis, founder and principal engineer here at Azura Associates. I've been working with anaerobic digesters, biogas, biodigesters, RNG systems for more than 30 years. Today we're going to be talking about the number one thing people get wrong when they're trying to assess a project's viability. So say you've got a good-sized dairy farm, something around 50,000 head, and you had 10 pounds per day. Your BMP is 300 cubic meters per ton, and you're looking at 85% volatile solids. Now that's when your EPC, your technology vendor, suggested you take some samples and you went out to the pile and you sampled. Then afterwards, you're looking at BMP 250 cubic meters per ton at 75% VS. So overall, between this, you've lost 17%. Down. Not so bad. Now, the problem with this analysis is it's a little bit oversimplified and actually dead wrong. In fact, what you'll see in here is, if you know how to look at these numbers, you've actually lost 3 times more than that. So where does that loss come from? First, let's look and see that we actually know what we're talking about in terms of all of these numbers. 10 pounds per day. What is that? So that's actually 10 pounds of dry solids per day. 10 pounds of total solids or dry solids, depending on who you're talking to, what terminology they use. And the biomethane potential, the BMP test, that's 300 cubic meters of methane. I'll write that as CH4, the chemical formula here, per ton of what? Per ton of volatile solids. I'll write that out. Volatile solids in the manure. And 85% VS, what is that? Well, that's actually 85% of the total solids are volatile. So 10 pounds per day of total solids at 85% means you've got 8.5 pounds per day of VS. Afterwards, when you went out and sampled the manure pile, you've got 250 cubic meters of methane per ton of volatile solids. Now, the problem falls in, these are 2 totally different flavors of manure. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, here on the left-hand side, we're talking about manure as excreted. So we have our happy beef critter. the manure as it comes out of the animal, 10 pounds per day as total solids, or 8.5 pounds per day of volatile solids, of which that you're about 210 tons per day as volatile solids. Now, when you went out and sampled the pile, that was over here where your digester is going to be, the pile, your future digester site. Here it's been sitting out in the yard for 2 weeks. So what's been happening during this time as it's been sitting out? It dries out, but it also, this is the key, it biodegrades. Every second of every day, from as soon as it leaves the animal, that manure continues to biodegrade. That manure is full of fresh, healthy bacteria. It's warm body temperature, and it biodegrades and continues right until the moment it goes in the digester, when it still biodegrades, except you're able to capture the gas. Now, what happens though is you're losing 47%. You're down to 113 tons per day of VS by the time it comes to go into the digester. So you've lost 47% of your solids. So what's happening here between the animal and the digester is we have collection. Your manure management practices matter. They matter a lot. And whether it's a water wash system, you have a chain scraper alley, whether you're moving manure with bucket loaders, how and how often you manage your manure matters quite a lot. So what happens on collection is as the manure sits on the yard or in the corral between then and the digester, it's aging. You know that, for example, you've all seen those time-lapse videos of, say, a tomato rotting. Starts off as nice, ripe, fresh fruit, and eventually caves in, flattens out, squashes down. Now, let's think about what's happening in terms of the manure. When it comes out of the animal, lands on the ground, it continues to biodegrade or to compost or degrade, even when it's in a pile, until it goes into the digester. So in the real world, how does that happen? Well, if you scrape the corral every 2 weeks, some of that manure is 2 weeks old. And some of that manure might only be 2 hours old, depending on when the last animal was through there. And so at that point, what's that age of that manure on average? Now also though, think to putting vegetables in the fridge. We put vegetables in the fridge and chill them so they don't biodegrade or start rotting too fast. Say for example, in the winter time, when it's below freezing, that manure hits your RCC or your sand bedding or whatever you've got on your farm, and that manure chills quite fast and becomes pretty stable as a frozen hockey puck. However, in the summer, it's the opposite. Just a year and a half ago, Michael and I, we were in Mexico on a project, and there, when it's more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit out in the sun, you can just imagine how fast that manure breaks down and we lose volatile solids. And so that's the key, is solids are lost through the whole time, whether it's through the aging and collection process. Or SLAC, this is the key feature. Understanding the SLAC in your process is critical to understanding what's going on and if your project is going to pencil or not. And you might not notice it because every day or couple days, the wheel loader is pushing more material into that manure pile. The manure is drying out, so maybe it's crusting over, it's getting a little bit smaller, and you might not actually notice that loss of VS. But this VS loss is a thing that's been going on for, well, it's been going on forever. In this case, you're losing more than half of your money. You're not getting an RNG value of, say, around $30,000 per day, what you would if you're only putting in fresh manure as excreted. Instead, you're only getting $15,000 per day for this size of project. As RNG, right? You've lost half of your value, you've lost half of the revenue for your business case. You're missing more than $15,000 a day in gas revenue by not fully accounting for this. Now, the good news is though, there's hope. We now understand exactly what's happening and where that fuel is going. It's not going to the digester, it's degrading while it's sitting out in the yard. So in the summertime, you can be losing this gas quite quickly when it's 80, 90, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. This digestion process is going to continue on out in the corral, out in the yard, not in your digester where you want it to happen. The good news is we can take advantage of this information. In the winter time, we probably don't need to do much extra, and we can maybe even slow down our manure collection because we know that frozen manure is not going to break down too fast, any more than, say, frozen fruit breaks down in your freezer. However, we know that even cool fruit and fruit in your refrigerator will still break down. Instead of a couple hours on the counter in the summertime, you might be days or a week or two during cold weather. Similarly, in the spring and fall, that's when you're going to need to start to bring in extra hands to move that manure faster and get in fresh manure into your digester. And then in the summertime, well, of course, you'll need to be even more aggressive on your manure management plan. So all of these things are real easy opportunities to get more fuel into your digester so that as this material breaks down, you're able to take advantage of that and harvest that fuel value. So this is not just for manure, right? This applies to everything, whether it's food waste, SSO, OFMSW, anywhere where the organic material is out in nature, it has an opportunity to be breaking down. That's where understanding that fuel value and where it could be lost, that will give you the insights in terms of making sure you're able to capture that and get the most gas production and most revenue for your project. This is something here at Azura we would look at for feedstock evaluation, project development, due diligence on property transactions, or look at in terms of the overall scope of, say, a Feld Zero or some sort of project development work. But absolutely, taking care of SLAC and understanding the SLAC in your project is a really critical piece of managing your overall financial plan. If you want us to work through the arithmetic of this example, leave us a note in the comments below. We'll be happy to put that together in a later video.